Have you ever been in a situation where someone completely ignored you or took you for granted, only to suddenly show intense interest the moment you started moving on? It's a painful and confusing experience, isn't it? 1 minute, you're begging for their attention, and the next, they can't get enough of you. What is going on? Unfortunately, this scenario is all too common in our relationships, both romantic and platonic. It's as if some people have an innate desire to control and possess others, only valuing them when they feel their grip slipping away. This dynamic can leave us feeling used, disrespected, and deeply insecure. But here's the thing, we don't have to be victims of this pattern. The ancient philosophy of Stoicism offers us profound insights and practical strategies to navigate these challenging situations with grace, dignity, and inner strength. By embracing the principles of Stoicism, we can regain control over our own lives and emotions and no longer be at the mercy of those who only want us when we no longer want them. So, without further ado, let's dive into the 10 key Stoic principles that can help us overcome this frustrating dynamic. Lesson 1. Understand the difference between what is and is not within your control. One of the foundational tenets of Stoicism is the idea that we should only focus on the things that are within our control and let go of the things that are not. As the ancient Stoic philosopher Epictetus famously said, "The things in our control are by nature free, unrestrained, unhindered, but those not in our control are weak, slavish, restrained, belonging to others." When it comes to the situation of someone only wanting us when we no longer want them, a large part of the struggle lies in our attempts to control the actions and feelings of others. We desperately try to win back their affection, to make them see our worth, to force them to want us again. But the truth is, we have no power over their desires, their attention, or their choices. The only thing we can control is our own response and how we choose to handle the situation. By recognizing this distinction between what is and is not within our control, we can free ourselves from the burden of trying to manipulate or change the other person. Instead, we can focus our energy on cultivating our own inner strength, self-respect, and emotional well-being. Lesson 2. Practice Stoic detachment. Closely related to the idea of controlling only what is within our power is the Stoic principle of detachment. According to the Stoics, we should strive to maintain a sense of emotional distance and objectivity, even in the face of intense experiences or difficult relationships. When someone only wants us, when we no longer want them, it can be easy to get caught up in a whirlwind of emotions, hurt, anger, confusion, and a desperate desire to win back their affection. But the Stoics would encourage us to take a step back and observe these feelings with a sense of calm detachment. As Marcus Aurelius wrote, "The universe is change. Our life is what our thoughts make it." By choosing to view the situation with a detached, philosophical perspective, we can prevent our emotions from overwhelming us and clouding our judgment. This doesn't mean we should suppress our feelings or pretend they don't exist. Rather, it's about acknowledging them, understanding them, and then consciously choosing how to respond. With practice, we can cultivate a sense of inner equanimity that allows us to weather the storms of life with greater resilience and clarity. Lesson 3. Embrace the impermanence of all things. One of the core beliefs of Stoicism is the recognition that everything in the universe is in a constant state of flux. As the Stoic philosopher Heraclitus famously said, "The only constant is change." This principle applies not only to the physical world, but also to our relationships, emotions, and life circumstances. When someone only wants us, when we no longer want them, it can feel like a profound betrayal or a shattering of our expectations. We may have thought that their affection and attention were permanent, and we're devastated when that turns out not to be the case. But the Stoics would remind us that nothing lasts forever, and that clinging to the false notion of permanence only leads to suffering. By embracing the impermanence of all things, we can learn to hold our relationships and experiences with a lighter touch, knowing that they will inevitably change and evolve over time. This doesn't mean we should be indifferent or detached from our loved ones. Rather, it's about cultivating a sense of acceptance and flexibility so that we can navigate the ebbs and flows of our relationships with greater resilience and equanimity. Lesson 4. Practice Stoic self-sufficiency. Another key principle of Stoicism is the idea of self-sufficiency, or the ability to find happiness and fulfillment within ourselves, rather than relying on external circumstances or the approval of others. When someone only wants us, when we no longer want them, it's easy to fall into the trap of tying our self-worth and happiness to their shifting desires. We may feel like we're only valuable when they're paying attention to us, and that our sense of self-worth hinges on their validation. But the Stoics would encourage us to resist this temptation and instead cultivate a strong sense of inner self-sufficiency. As the Stoic philosopher Seneca wrote, "It is not the man who has too little, but the man who craves more that is poor." By learning to find joy, purpose, and fulfillment within ourselves, we can free ourselves from the need to seek validation or approval from others. We can still enjoy healthy, meaningful relationships, but we don't allow them to become the sole source of our happiness and self-worth. This doesn't mean we should become completely detached or indifferent to the opinions and actions of others. Rather, it's about striking a balance. We can still care deeply about our relationships, but we don't let them define us or determine our sense of self-worth. Lesson 5. Reframe your perspective with Stoic rationality. One of the hallmarks of Stoicism is its emphasis on rationality and the power of our mental faculties to shape our experiences. The Stoics believed that it's not the events or circumstances themselves that cause us suffering, but rather our interpretations and judgments about those events. When someone only wants us, when we no longer want them, it's easy to fall into a spiral of negative thoughts and emotions. We may feel hurt, betrayed, or even ashamed, and these feelings can cloud our judgment and distort our perspective. But the Stoics would encourage us to pause and examine our thoughts and assumptions with a more rational, dispassionate lens. As the Stoic philosopher Epictetus wrote, "It's not what happens to you, but how you react to it that matters." By reframing our perspective and challenging the stories we tell ourselves about the situation, we can begin to see it in a more objective, constructive light. Instead of viewing it as a personal rejection or a sign of our own unworthiness, we can recognize it as a reflection of the other person's own insecurities, fears, or patterns of behavior. This doesn't mean we should simply dismiss our feelings or pretend they don't exist. Rather, it's about cultivating the ability to step back, analyze the situation rationally, and then choose a response that aligns with our values and long-term well-being. Lesson 6. Embrace Stoic resilience and fortitude. One of the most admired qualities of the Stoics was their remarkable resilience and fortitude in the face of adversity. They believed that true strength of character was not measured by our ability to avoid or eliminate difficulties, but by our capacity to confront and overcome them. When someone only wants us when we no longer want them, it can feel like a relentless and demoralizing battle. We may be tempted to give up, to surrender to the pain and frustration, or to seek revenge or validation through unhealthy means. But the Stoics would encourage us to cultivate a spirit of resilience and fortitude, to stand firm in our values, our self-worth, and our commitment to our own well-being. As the Stoic philosopher Seneca wrote, "It is not because things are difficult that we do not dare. It is because we do not dare that they are difficult." By embracing this Stoic mindset, we can tap into an inner reservoir of strength and determination that allows us to weather the storms of life with greater grace and composure. We may not be able to control the actions of others, but we can control how we choose to respond and how we shape our own character in the process. Lesson 7. Practice Stoic acceptance and equanimity. Another key principle of Stoicism is the idea of acceptance and equanimity, the ability to calmly and gracefully accept the reality of our circumstances, even when they are beyond our control. When someone only wants us when we no longer want them, it can be tempting to resist the situation, to fight against it, or to try to manipulate the outcome. But the Stoics would encourage us to instead cultivate a sense of acceptance and equanimity, to acknowledge the reality of the situation without judgment or resistance. As the Stoic philosopher Marcus Aurelius wrote, "The universe is change. Our life is what our thoughts make it." By choosing to accept the situation with a calm and collected mindset, we can free ourselves from the emotional turmoil and energy-draining battles that often arise from our attempts to control or change the uncontrollable. This doesn't mean we have to like or approve of the situation. It simply means we recognize it for what it is, without getting caught up in the drama or the desire to fight against it. With practice, we can develop the ability to navigate even the most challenging circumstances with a sense of inner peace and clarity. Lesson 8. Embrace Stoic virtue and integrity. At the heart of Stoicism is a deep commitment to living a life of virtue and integrity, to aligning our actions and choices with our highest ideals and principles. When someone only wants us when we no longer want them, it can be tempting to abandon our values in a desperate attempt to win back their affection or validation. We may be tempted to compromise our boundaries, to engage in manipulative behavior, or to stoop to their level in order to get what we want. But the Stoics would encourage us to resist this temptation and instead remain steadfast in our commitment to virtue and integrity. As the Stoic philosopher Epictetus wrote, "The essence of good is a certain kind of will. The essence of evil is a certain kind of will." By choosing to respond to the situation with wisdom, courage, justice, and temperance, the four cardinal virtues of Stoicism, we can not only preserve our self-respect and dignity, but also cultivate a stronger sense of inner strength and purpose. This doesn't mean we have to be perfect or immune to the pain and frustration of the situation. It simply means that we strive to act in alignment with our highest values, even when it's difficult or uncomfortable to do so. Lesson 9. Practice Stoic compassion and empathy. While Stoicism is often associated with detachment and emotional distance, the Stoics also placed a great emphasis on the importance of compassion and empathy. When someone only wants us when we no longer want them, it can be easy to respond with anger, bitterness, or a desire for revenge. We may feel justified in lashing out or cutting them off completely, without any consideration for their own perspective or struggles. But the Stoics would encourage us to approach the situation with a more compassionate and empathetic mindset. As the Stoic philosopher Marcus Aurelius wrote, "The universe is change. Our life is what our thoughts make it." By trying to understand the other person's motivations, fears, and inner turmoil, we can cultivate a sense of compassion and even forgiveness. This doesn't mean we have to condone their behavior or continue to engage with them in an unhealthy way, but it does mean that we can approach the situation with a greater sense of understanding and a willingness to extend grace, even in the face of our own hurt and disappointment. This Stoic approach can not only help us navigate the situation with more emotional resilience, but it can also potentially lead to a more positive resolution or outcome, as the other person may be more open to change and growth when met with compassion rather than judgment or retaliation. Lesson 10. Embrace Stoic tranquility and eudaimonia. At the heart of Stoicism is a profound aspiration for a life of tranquility, contentment, and eudaimonia, a state of deep and lasting well-being. When someone only wants us when we no longer want them, it can feel like a constant state of turmoil and unrest. We may be plagued by negative emotions, obsessive thoughts, and a sense of insecurity and self-doubt. But the Stoics would encourage us to cultivate a life of tranquility and eudaimonia, even in the face of such challenging circumstances. As the Stoic philosopher Seneca wrote, "Tranquility is the goal of the wise man." By embracing the principles of Stoicism that we've explored throughout this discussion, understanding the distinction between what is and is not within our control, practicing detachment, embracing impermanence, cultivating self-sufficiency, reframing our perspective, developing resilience and fortitude, accepting reality with equanimity, upholding virtue and integrity, and extending compassion, we can work towards a state of inner peace and contentment that is not contingent on the shifting desires of others. This doesn't mean we'll never experience pain, disappointment, or frustration, but it does mean that we can develop the inner resources to navigate these challenges with greater grace, wisdom, and a deep sense of purpose and fulfillment. So, let's end this discussion with a call to action. If you found this exploration of Stoic principles helpful in navigating the situation of someone only wanting you when you no longer want them, please comment Stoic strength below. By doing so, you'll not only capture the essence of our discussion, but you'll also help to cultivate a community of like-minded individuals who are committed to living with greater wisdom, resilience, and inner peace.